for. And I want to introduce our very good, lovely friend, David Balen. The CMA has worked with Balen's now for probably close on, no, actually it probably is about 25 years, I think, David, something like that. It's an awfully, awfully long time. So if you would like to just say hello and introduce yourself, that would be fantastic.
Don't say it like that, an awfully long time. Oh my God. Well, hello everybody, lovely to see you all, and I really do hope you're finding your optimism and your core values remain largely untouched by all the craziness out there. I'm certainly happy to be here and help you in whatever way I can with questions about how the insurance and possibly risk management issues, which I think may crop up a bit more than the insurance per se. I think this is where there's a lot of confusion between all the varying guidelines, and obviously your PA, CMA, they have professional guidelines as too, quite rightly. This is one of the reasons you join a PA is the support that you get, the information that you get, and the network that you get. So I think, that's fine. So really, let's go over to the questions. Anything Jayney wants to say. You can always contact me via Balen's if you've got any personal questions that you don't want publicly aired. But hopefully we can help clear up some of the main ones while we're online together.
That's fantastic, David. Thank you very much. And thanks for pointing out that people can make contact with you directly, because it's, I know that we've had a lot of kind of really very personal questions that people don't necessarily want to have asked in the group because it's, for professional reasons and so on, or directly relating to more identifiable issues with particular clients. So for a, from a perspective of, I suppose, professionalism and security, it's great that people can actually contact you directly. So we've had a lot of questions, and feel free to chime in but with the chat, because we're now up to nearly 60 people on the call at the moment. So I won't unmute you just yet. If we have time at the end, we will do that. But let's crack on. So the first question is from Jane. She says, my question for the tutorial today is, are we able to offer courses, and if so, how many people can attend with social distancing in place? And if visors are supplied, can the students practice on each other? It's Reiki that I'm teaching, so no need for physical contact, but can they get within 2 meters of each other? Would the students need to wear masks all day? Obviously, David and I had a little bit of a chat before we came into the group, and David, you were saying this is very much a practice issue, and I would agree with you, but is there anything there from an insurance perspective, or anything that the underwriters might actually feel that they might not like, or are they okay with people teaching? What's the situation?
Well, maybe it'd be helpful if I just reiterate. By the way, Balen website, there's a COVID section. We're giving regular updates. We're plugging you into, I'm sure CMA are doing this too, to the various government points. We're making comments on it. And so that's continually moving. So that's a useful resource.
Yes, thank
but
you.
Let me just state a few basic principal facts, which will probably illuminate the rest of this webinar as far as the insurance position is concerned. The underwriters we use, we have a very flexible arrangement with them, but there are certain things that you need to know. And one is that actually the policy is silent on pandemics, on COVID, and we know 1 or 2 insurers, not ours, are considering putting a COVID exclusion on. But we can talk about that down the line. But you should just know that there is no exclusion. It's defending you in the event of negligence. However, however is that there are general terms and conditions on any contract, and insurance is no exception to that. And so what you do have is a general duty of care, that you're not deliberately going to harm someone, flying in the face of known information, and you still proceed with something which could harm someone. And also there's an exclusion on criminal acts. So remember, the government, this is a public health issue, and there is legislation that is underpinning what the government are putting out. So if you breach any of that, you are quite probably technically performing a criminal act, and no insurance policy of a malpractice nature anyway is going to cover that. So you should bear that in mind as an overarching view. I think also to say that with PPE, hygiene, safety, all those things are very important considerations. Our sector, as we know, has been largely ignored by government and everyone else, much to my continuing usual frustration about this situation. Jayney will know I've been exercising my grumpy old man gene for quite a long time now about this and the failure of groups to come together, present a unified voice. That's something that needs to happen. But if we just realise that the government haven't really been very much clued in on what we do, so in a sense, if you can go over and above the government guidelines, and if your PAs have got some useful guidance, which is therapy specific, which the government one kind of is and kind of isn't, then I think you can demonstrate, really high standards and generate that confidence that of probably quite a nervy clientele, worried clientele, may have about coming back to seeing you. So I think, it's about handling the relationship, which is where you could get the complaint, rather than the insurance says, yes, you can do this, no, you can't do that. So I think the other thing I would say is audit trail is vital. Now, we've always talked about record keeping, as you know, keep your records for, as long as you can, indefinitely if possible, for all sorts of reasons. But with this kind of situation where there are PPE requirements, where there is guidance, where you're supposed to follow certain things, what hasn't quite been emphasised is the fact you need an audit trail to say, well, actually, I did this, this and this. Now, my advice to you would be to try and do that for each client in the notes, to say that blah, 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 just a general heading which says, did this, explain to client, got their permission. And I would also suggest maybe you could even introduce a pre-client session COVID questionnaire, so you can demonstrate that you checked that all was well their end before they came into your space. So I think all of those things are kind of risk management-y things which need to be recorded. And if you don't record them, then if a claim comes against you, how is the insurer going to defend you? So I think that's all I'll say, because I'm sure, Jayney, you've got input to make.
We have actually, David. I'm really so glad to hear you say this. Thank you, because all along we've been saying to people, you need a paper trail, because in the instance of something coming up, you've got to be able to show that you've done X, Y, Z. One of the things that sorry, let me just mute. So there we go. So one of the things that has actually come up not so long ago is where the sorry, my screen is playing up. There we are. So yeah, so start again. So one of the things that we have been saying is keep a paper trail. We have got we're creating checklists and so on, and one of the things we are creating for you is an intake form, which you may already have these, but you might want to cast your eye over that. So I think it's really crucial to actually get that sort of into play as soon as possible. But I think something you touched on there, David, was actually in the client notes. So aside from your intake form, which is asking, of course, the person all about have they been exposed to COVID, etc., etc. There's that side of things, but then there's also the other side of things, which is where you need to be able to explain to your client, this is how I'm protecting you, this is how I'm sanitizing my environment, this is what I'm doing to support you. So you've got both sides. And then, as David said, in the client notes, I think it's absolutely crucial, more so than ever, to keep incredibly comprehensive client notes. I think that would stand you in very, very good stead. I'm sure David would agree with that. So right, let me just go on to the next question. What we'll do is we'll take the questions that people emailed and Facebooked in first, and then we'll go over to the questions in the chat box. So moving swiftly on. Right, okay, let me just have a quick look at this one. This is a very interesting one. It's quite practice orientated. complicated, but it's also got some nuances about insurance. Let me read you the question. It says, I'm a certified cancer touch therapist and hydrotherm tranquil C massage therapist. So I'm trained specially to be able to accommodate massage adaptations or adaptations and alternatives for people on their cancer journey. So there's no need for them to be turned away on the basis that we tick the cancer box on the consultation form. This means that I can see someone without having to have GP permission first. Not that that happens much anyway, as we all know. In light of COVID, if someone is high risk, as in these circumstances, I'm ordinarily insured to work with them. Does this continue to be the case, or is it left somewhat to professional judgment, as are so many things at the moment? If I have done the risk assessments, consultation, got client consent, and working safely within my usual framework, ticked all the PPE boxes, client ticked the PPE box as appropriate, etc., etc. Am I still covered at this moment in time to provide treatment? Obviously, if the person is in the middle of chemo or immediately post-surgery, it would be a good decision to defer a treatment, even though the one-to-one therapy such as Cancer Touch is providing a huge amount of mental, emotional, physical and spiritual support to the person at the time they need it most. I think we'd all go along with that as practitioners. But if they're out of shielding and otherwise all the boxes are ticked, from an insurance perspective, David, all things being equal, is there any reason why this lady should not actually continue to be able to practice?
I don't see any reason why she should cease practice at all. I mean, you know, one of my big beefs is there's so much resource out there that can help so many people. And now the green light, if we can call it a green light, has been given. You've got close contact guidance that the government has posted. I'm sure you've given everyone those informations. I was attending a massage related webinar not that long ago, and they were talking about using visors and masks, not visors or masks. I think also, you know, offer the client a mask. If the client refuses, then I would just note that in the records. Obviously, if you've got any symptoms that you think is anything like COVID from contacts that you may have had, then that would be, I think, your red flag for not going ahead with the session until you've done your quarantine for a week or something. And I would just say again, also a questionnaire beforehand, just to make sure the client's not been in touch with people who've got it or that they're displaying any of those symptoms. So that's due diligence as far as you can go, I would have thought. But what surprised me in that massage webinar was that what they were saying, and I don't know if this chimes with you, but they were saying that, you know, visors on their own aren't sufficient, nor are masks, which I found quite interesting.
Yes, that is interesting. You see, the thing is that's an interesting perspective, because the problem is that there's no research supporting that. So that really is their best guess. And this is a real problem. I think it's really important for everybody on the call to really understand that, you know, nobody knows enough at the moment to actually really be able to prescribe and say, this is what you've got to do, this is going to keep you safe, this is going to keep your clients safe. We simply don't have the data don't exist. So, you know, that is, it's interesting, but I understand why they would be saying that, because, you know, it's sort of belt and braces. So it's probably best case scenario.
Well, and I think, you know, best case is the thing, isn't it? What is the best that you can do within your knowledge and experience, and how does that marry in with what the government was saying? And at the end of the day, some of it's subjective, but some of it is very clear.
Yeah.
I think do more than the minimum would always be my recommendation, even if you think you're going over the top, or as long as it's done in a way that doesn't upset or make the client feel twitchy or nervous. You see, one thing that I think gets overlooked in all this is that, you know, consent, remember, consent is at the core of a lot of things that go on in terms of interrelationship professionally. And, you know, I would, as I said to you earlier, I think the way you manage it is before they get into the room, you know, this is what I propose to do. This is what I would prefer you to do. Are you okay with this? Yes, no. Then you don't have the embarrassing and time consuming going through all the rigmarole when they're in the room. because I think you're kind of limited to the amount of time you can spend, which again is crazy. Because I mean, if you're in that space, you're in that space. What difference is 45 minutes going to make or an hour going to make? I don't know. This is my personal view. This isn't advice, and I'm not speaking on behalf of Balen's.
Sure.
People know me as, you know, I do speak my mind. I think there is a lot of stuff that probably isn't relevant. If we're biting the bullet because we're concerned about our professional image, then I think that's another conversation. But coming back to consent, remember, it's not just consent by giving all the information beforehand. It could involve ongoing consent, which means 2 or 3 treatments down the road, just check. Now, we agreed this, you were okay with it, then are you still okay now? That's the thing that often gets forgotten.
Yes, you're absolutely right. That is a very, very good point, because we've been explaining to people about, you know, making sure that they do their intake forms and so on, as I said earlier. But actually, David, that is a very, very good point. And I think one that I think most of us will think, oh gosh, yes, that's well worth doing. And I think also, just to hark back to what you were saying just slightly earlier, which is managing expectations. As you say, you know, you've only got a limited time in your practice room. You don't want to suddenly have to have the conversation, you know, will you wear a mask, won't you wear a mask, and so on. Just set your market stall out, manage expectations, let everybody know exactly what is going to happen, exactly what your expectations are of them and what they can expect from you. That way they can simply walk in and do whatever it is that you're doing with them. So yeah, thank you. That makes an awful
I would only add to that, make sure that you do what you said you were going to do.
Yes. Very much so.
If it was me, I'd probably forget, given my advanced years. But I mean, you know, you maybe a crib sheet if you're kind of, oh, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, you know, whatever.
Not much gets past you, we know that. So, right, okay, another one. From lovely Deborah. No, I think this is from Deborah. Right, okay. Are we covered to teach courses again? These are typically 2-day courses with only one student or someone from their own household or bubble as their model. So as I understand it, I believe that Deborah is doing a hands-on training. So I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I'm assuming if it's a model, they probably are doing hands-on work. So I guess the caveat is yes, with the appropriate PPE. But David, have the underwriters said anything about teaching?
No,
teaching?
I mean, they rely on us largely, so
Right.
they haven't been too exercised about it. The other thing just to bear in mind is it's very hard to prove you've given someone COVID. Actually, you know, if truth be told, that will be a very difficult one, which is why I'm saying make sure that your backup notes support your efforts at hygiene and creating safe space. But what I would say is that before all this lockdown occurred, we were ahead of the game. We already spoke with the underwriters and said that, you know, people would be doing stuff online. Was that okay? So in case we get an online question, the answer is we've already got that cleared. There are other implications about giving courses, which we can maybe talk about another time. But insurance wise, no, there isn't a block on it. Remember, unless you've got a teaching policy, you're covered to give people CPD and you know, courses for which there is not a qualification at the end. If you're delivering a qualification, you need to flag that up with Balen's. And remember that we're always looking to see there's a proper robust exam at the end, that there's some case study work, and that people have had a practical. So there are bits, those are the sort of standards that we've tried to stand behind over the years, because we're all concerned about how the outside world looks at things, and obviously we want safe practitioners, but we're also looking at the reputation of our sector. Yeah. So I hope that's helpful. There's no block on it, but basically it depends what the course is, you know, how that's framed.
Yes, of course, David, thank you very much. That's brilliant. Right, okay, the next question is, right, I believe this is, here we go, yeah. As soon as lockdown commenced, I stopped seeing clients in my consulting room and have been conducting counselling and psychotherapy consultations via Skype, Zoom and WhatsApp. And
not all at the same time, I hope.
Presumably not, no. One would hope not. So it's been surprisingly successful, which is great because, you know, we're helping people to pivot to go online, and that was wonderful. So we did some really helpful tutorials on exactly that topic. This lady, though, has 2 clients who are unhappy about continuing their therapy virtually, and as a result, their mental health has been compromised. My consulting room is small, and I can only just comply with the 2-meter distance restrictions, but I have no opening window to the outside, and my air conditioning unit simply recycles air from within the room. I'm therefore extremely concerned about the risks of infection, even with face masks or visors, and have explained to these clients, due to this, I'm unable to see them. Apart from searching for an alternative consulting room, do you have any suggestions? In addition, if I were to see clients in my home where distancing and ventilation would not be an issue, where would I stand from an insurance liability point of view?
Ooh,
it's a big one.
Well, I think the first thing that struck me when you started to read the question out was something around what we said earlier, which was getting the consent of the client. Now, clearly, the client is saying, I don't want the distance, I want the close contact relationship, which I think is perfectly, well, it's very important, as I understand it, in counselling, psychotherapy. How I think I deal with this is to knock up a questionnaire, which is basically a consent form saying that, for my part, I will disinfect the space. You see, the other thing is she may not want you, the therapist, to be wearing a mask, you know, apart from her wearing a mask, because as we all know, there's a whole body language side and there are signals and stuff that go on. So I think there needs to be consent from both parties, understanding what the potential risks might be. That might be something CMA could help with some legal advice to draw up some kind of COVID specific disclaimer, if you like, almost based on an agreed statement between the 2 of you. And something along the lines of that, I will let you know if I do come down with any COVID symptoms, I will let you know immediately and will not see you until I've gone through a quarantine period. And equally, I would ask you to do the same so that there's no risk of infecting other clients. Ideally, I'd prefer to have a mask and a visor, and that you have at least a mask. You know, would you be agreeable to this? Yes, no. So I think you would need to frame it that way. The insurance, as I said, is silent, but bear in mind your common law duty to mitigate loss, follow the government guidelines, blah, blah, blah. But there is some discretion in the government guidelines. Some of them are guidelines, they're not acts of parliament. So that's where you've got a bit of wiggle room. If you can be shown to be reasonable, remember the common law thing is about reasonableness. And the other thing is about due diligence. So you've done all your agreements. Also, the other thing is the health of the individual has to come first. If their mental health is being compromised by X, Y, and Z, you put that in the notes, you reflect it in that agreement between the 2 of you, and you justify that agreement to say, normally I wouldn't do this, but because you've said blah, 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 that this is affecting your mental health, you know, I will make an exception in your case, and manage it that way. The insurance will support you because you've done everything you can to comply with the law, and that this is an issue around mental health.
Yes, absolutely. The other thing that struck me was to actually ask the lady, I don't know whether she does, but actually has whether she has a garden that she could potentially work in, you know, if that's an option as well. Because obviously then, you know, with correct social distancing, then you can be mask free, can't you? If you can certainly go and sit in a pub without a mask.
Yeah, I mean, how do we work that one out? You can go to a pub, you can do this, you can go to a football match, but you can't help someone with a mental and emotional situation that they're finding very hard to deal with. I mean, come on, guys.
Yeah, quite, absolutely. Right.
Anyway, as I say, I'm sorry, folks, so I'm going to shut up. It would just trigger my kind of, my riffs, which we don't want. We've only got an hour.
Okay, so we've got the next one, and we've got a load in the sidebar as well. So Are there any restrictions on numbers for sound groups and gongs and sound instruments indoors? Oh no, that's we just said that one, didn't we? No,
we haven't done the gong in the barn bit. No.
Gong in a barn, that's right. She works in a tithe barn and is able to keep a 2-metre distance for each person attending with plenty of ventilation. Well, that sounds okay to me, David.
There's no exclusion on the policy. Again, you know, just if you're not sure, have a quick sprint through the government guidelines. But you probably, I mean, it doesn't even sound like there's close contact involved. Offer people, suggest that they might like to wear a mask for blah 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 reasons. Someone I just saw on the pop-up said there's some see-through masks. That's kind of interesting. You know, no doubt they have see-through spacesuits next and specialized sheep dips, but no, I mean, what you're saying sounds fine.
Yes, I think so as well. It sounds reasonable, doesn't it? Okay, so let's start with the questions from the group themselves. Right, okay, so hello, I have a question. This is from Neil. I'd like to do some in-person, funny enough, in-person gong workshops. Isn't that funny? The attendees will be lying down throughout at a 2-metre distance with their own mats and all hygiene in place. There's no contact, and I keep at least 1 metre, if not right. Fair enough. Do I need to ask the attendees to wear masks? I think we've answered that question, haven't we? So yeah, that's it. Thank you for
ideally, but as I understand it, it's not mandatory like going into a supermarket.
No.
Or an aircraft. The only thing I would say is do a little audit trail of the space. Make sure you're kind of is it disinfecting you would use, or sanitizing the mats they'll be lying on. Make it clear to them that what you're doing, so they can feel comfortable about it, and it's public knowledge. You might want to do a little risk assessment and write it down somewhere for, you know, and sign it and date it or something. I know it all sounds box ticky, but remember, folks, it's public health, and public health and safety, lots of underpinning legislation, lots of box ticking required. So although it's painful, I would just suggest, certainly while we're going through this initial period of getting back to some semblance of normality, I would go the extra mile until everything settles down and we know where we are.
David, I was just going to say something about risk assessments. We have been telling everybody to do your risk assessments, and we've pointed people in the direction of the, I believe it's, is it Public Health England? Or no, it's not, it's Health and Safety Executive. They actually have risk assessments, and so we've given all of those links, of course. But I just want to remind everybody that risk assessments are not mandatory. We do suggest you do them. In fact, we really would like to insist that you do them. They're not mandatory though. If you have a group of fewer than 5 people, any more than 5, they are mandatory. So do bear that in mind. If you have, you know, larger groups, you've got to do it.
Or if you run a health clinic, you know.
Yes, exactly.
Or a yoga space, maybe with a group of people or something. Yeah.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yes, it must be done. So we've got the next question is from Carol. In terms of risk assessment, I have a cabin in the garden. You lot with your barns and your cabins, it's all rather fabulous, isn't it? So Carol's
it's a CMA thing, obviously.
Evidently, yes. It's absolutely wonderful. It's very, very back to nature. So she's got a cabin in the garden, which has been working as a dual purpose massage room and hobbies room, has worked extremely well up till lockdown. I'm unable to remove the hobbies materials. Does this mean I cannot offer massage as well? I'm also claustrophobic, which would mean that wearing a mask would be very stressful, and I would find excess intake of carbon dioxide a very serious challenge. I would also feel that this would compromise my clients as well. However, happy for them to wear a mask if they feel better and safer wearing one. Well, look, if you're doing massage, it's very, very clear. You've got to wear a mask. And the massage organisations are saying wear a mask and a visor.
And a visor.
We've covered that. Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, you're going to have to, you're an individual, you're a professional, you're going to have to really make some very, very hard decisions about, you know, can you somehow, you know, wear this equipment? If you absolutely can't, then you're going to have to find a way of pivoting your practice. So what I want you to do is to go away, Carol, and have a really, really good think, and perhaps watch the first tutorial that I did on how to pivot your practice and take it online. So it might be wanting to set up courses. You know, there you've got great expertise, you've got individual experience. So I would say to you, go back, watch that video, because it's really, really helpful. And, you know, it may well just get you out of a really sticky spot at the moment. So I think that's my perspective on that one. Do you have anything to add to that, David, at all?
Not really. I mean, I think you've said it, that you might have to think about a different way of working, certainly for a while. I mean, your health is important. It's not just about the client's health. And I don't know what other masks there are that enable you to breathe properly, don't make you feel claustrophobic, that would enable you to do what you're doing.
Yeah.
And also, you don't want to frighten the client with some weird space gear. So
right, absolutely.
yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, I'm sure, Jayney, you'll be able to dialogue a bit more with her if she's got a bit more detail she needs on that. But
we can do that.
good luck with that one.
Yeah. Okay, lovely. So Anne-Marie says, is it a requirement to purchase a temperature machine to test clients before use, or is it a choice? It's a choice. There's no law that's been laid down. In fact, I haven't even really seen it suggested. Now, don't forget, everybody, that, you know, because complementary medicine and natural health care is very much being studiously ignored, except for in Scotland, and also I got a very nice letter from Northern Ireland and a reasonable letter from Wales. But they generally, most of the legislation and guidelines have really been targeted towards the beauty profession. So what we're doing is using our best professional judgment to extrapolate from those guidelines. Now, of course, within complementary medicine, we understand that there are so many different types of discipline. You know, we recognize hundreds of different disciplines. So we realize that not everybody's hands-on, not everybody's, you know, has the luxury of being able to sit, you know, a distance apart and to be able to do talking therapies or homeopathy or nutrition, that sort of thing. So it's all, you know, but we are using our best professional judgment in order to bring you the best advice that we can give you. So I've not seen, to answer that question, I don't know about you, David, have you seen any requirements for a temperature machine?
Absolutely not. Except unless you go in an airport, certain airlines are using them, of course.
Yeah, but not even hairdressers or anybody
well,
like.
let me put this another way. If part of your making the environment safe for your client, one creative way you can come up with is, how about having a temperature thing? Whether the client will be comfortable with that, I don't know. But you could certainly audit trial yourself so that you have not got a temperature. I don't know if there's a way of recording the temperature, but if there is, then that could form part of your audit check, so that you know, the clients, etc., know that you've checked that you haven't got any symptoms or anything that you might pass on to them. So I think, you know, no, there's no law that says you have to do it. But remember, I said earlier about going over and above what might be asked of you. That's one example where you might want to do it. I mean, a while back, I was shouted down a bit for suggesting that people, you know, might want to go and have a COVID check or something to see whether they have it or have had it, as part of their kind of pro bono, making sure that they were okay to deliver the thing. Now, that might be a bit of overkill, but certainly the temperature thing is another, probably an easier, more flexible way of doing that, actually, because you can do that day in, day out and make sure day to day you haven't got a temperature. So, you know, it's a good idea, actually.
Yes, absolutely. It is. The one slight fly in the ointment, though, of course, is that there's a high likelihood that we are infectious before we start to develop symptoms. So, you know, again, the data just really are so poor on everything to do with COVID, as we know. So best guess, fortunately, best.
We haven't got time to go through that one really today.
Right. Anne-Marie said she's unaware of a time limit being given for close contact services. 45 minutes is the recommended time limit now. That really brings me on to another topic, just very briefly. everybody listening, you are professionals. The onus is upon you to really make sure that you bring yourself up to speed with what's being said by the government, because we can do our very, very best and we can give you the guidance. But let's say you miss one of our announcements, or if you don't check Balen's site, or if you don't check the CMA site, or if you don't check the CMA Facebook page or the CMA YouTube channel, and you miss something really important, then you've got to make sure that you are hitting those links that we've given you as on a regular basis to make sure that you are absolutely up to date with the latest guidance. Okay, so please don't expect to just be spoon fed. I get the impression, I'm not saying anybody in the group, but practitioners that I've spoken to sort of recently have just been saying, oh, well, I'm just really relying on the CMA to give me information. Well, of course, that's wonderful. And we are really, really good at it. But please be professional and take responsibility as well. Chances are you may spot something that we've not seen. So, we would love you to say, hey, have you just seen this? It literally came out a minute ago. And we'll go, brilliant, bang, and we'll put it up so that everybody can get it. So, so just please be aware and please keep your eyes peeled. Okay.
We've certainly been inundated with queries, as you could imagine.
Yes.
And the thing is that, as I said earlier, this is a public health issue. We are insurance specialists, but we're not qualified or registered to give advice on public health issues. We can help you with general risk management. We can support you through whatever happens in your life practice-wise, and that's what we do. We look after carers. But at the end of the day, we've all got this individual duty to just check up on this stuff and make sure we're complying. And all we can do is say, follow the government guidance, follow your professional association. The insurance isn't stopping you doing something, however, it is subject, as I say, not do any criminal acts, and sometimes not following the law or flouting the law when you know what the law is could put you in a very tricky cover situation.
And as it's that old adage, that old legal cliche, isn't it, that ignorance is no defense. So yes, thank you, David, thank you very much for that. Now Jackie raises a really interesting question. Jackie says, for those of us who work from home, like a home salon, but only have one entrance to access the salon, it's a terraced house, so only through the main front door, what restriction needs to be relaxed by the government in order for them to be able to reopen? Now, I don't know about you, David, but I've not seen any guidance or law to actually suggest that you need to have a front door and a back door. Have you seen anything about that? No. Do you know, Jackie, please would you, if you've seen that, again, it's just a prime example, it may be something we've missed, but as I say, we're pretty hot, so I don't think so, but just in case we have, please ping it through. We need to see that, if that indeed has been stated anywhere.
It could be a local bylaw, because sometimes those things are slightly, let's use the word eccentric, or perhaps not always necessarily consistently followed from one area to another. Acupuncture needles and the Borough of London springs to mind, an example of that. The only thing that struck me when you read that out was the issue about your household insurance. And do they know that you've got a clinic at home and that people are coming in and out? We always recommend people notify their household insurers. Some people forget or don't realise they need to. I think at a time like this, if you haven't, it would be a good idea to notify and just let them know that there may be people coming through. I think the only thing I would say there is that clearly diligence along the lines of CMA and what we've already been saying today about risk management, securing the space, sanitizing the space, etc., etc. Having one way in, one way out, I don't know how that would work. I mean, I'm sure you'll be creative and try and do it in the best way you can.
Yeah.
keep a bit of an audit trail so you can show that you did your best to try and make it as safe as possible.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. There's a link there from Gail Zappacosta, who's put that link for us all about the lady who makes the see-through masks, which is wonderful. 20% goes to the NHS, which is really lovely. So we'll make sure that you get, well, you can actually copy that. That's in the chat box. Right, okay, Joy says, what if I have a bad reaction to wearing a mask? Well, okay, we've already answered that question and explained to you exactly what to do about that. Gail says, Jenny, we're using a software that is GDPR compliant and really simplifies the application of virtual practice. Great for the pivot. Oh, lovely. Gail, thank you very much. Gail's put her email there, and happy to chat to share as possibilities for others. Well, actually, in fact, Roberta, would you just make a note of that? Because once the chat goes, it goes. And, you know, I always worry about sometimes losing bits and pieces. So yeah, that's really lovely, Gail. Thank you. We will be in touch about that. She's also saying she's been using the temperature measure. The clients do not seem to object. Easy and inexpensive, point and click, part of our health and safety, simple, and it does display or show that we care. Yes, it does. That's great. Jane Hill says, occasionally I'm asked to do home visits. Where do you stand in this situation, or is it best to avoid this at this moment? Well, actually, Jane, we've spoken about this an awful lot. I'll just bring myself back onto screen, because I don't think I'm on screen at the moment. So yeah, Jane, we've spoken about this an awful lot in the recent, you know, sort of getting back sort of after lockdown. And of course, we may be looking at another lockdown at the moment. And here at the CMA, we are creating strategies for you to be able to pivot even more strongly and come back even stronger if there is another lockdown. So we'll keep you informed about that. But, you know, if you have to do home visits, the difficulty is that you can't control that environment. You can't go in and sanitize that environment. So I would suggest, given that we've covered it many, many times, I would suggest go back and watch the last 2 videos that we did. David, have you got any thoughts about you know, home visits at all? Is there anything from an insurance perspective that might be relevant?
Well, the first thing to say is, I'm assuming they're a Balen client. They're covered anywhere in the UK, so it's not a premises specific wording. Having said that, I think it's important to go back to what we said earlier about the pre-treatment protocols and about what you expect her to provide and what you will provide. So you will provide a sanitized, you know, couch, that you will arrive in a mask stroke visor or whatever it is. Trust that's okay. In keeping with the government guidelines, so it's not your decision, it's because of what the situation is demanding. So I think you just pre-manage it. As Jayney said, you can't expect them to fumigate the room and the space that you come into. I think that's just a risk that you will have to take, and I'm sure it will be fine. I think what might be useful is this, you know, I was talking about getting a sort of a COVID pre-treatment questionnaire. Might be worth asking them to sign and say, had no symptoms, none of my family resident in the house either, something like that. And then what else can you do? I think you've done everything you can if you do that kind of pre-thing. No, there's no restriction on the insurance.
Okay, absolutely. Now, thank you. What we're going to do is we're going to just move very swiftly on, because we've got questions coming through thick and fast and we've only got a quarter of an hour to get through them. So let's see if we can, I just want to say thank you to
I can come back another time. It's
yes, absolutely.
No expense spared.
Don't say we don't know how to show you a good time, everybody. That's what we do at the CMA. So
I'm skipping my lunch for this, folks. I'm sure I can hear you crying out there. Right.
What David's actually doing is digging his pond, and he's got a lot of sludge, he tells me.
It's a lake. It's not just a pond.
Sorry, lake. It is a lake, actually. That's true. I know. I've seen it. It's spectacular. Right. Okay. So Eileen says, Eileen's actually very kindly given the link about the new requirements for mandatory mask wearing in massage centres, beauty clinics and so on, no longer optional. So Brilliant, thank you. This is exactly the sort of support that we need. We rely on you guys as well, so thank you for that. That's lovely. Right, just a quick one from Laureen. Joined a little late, working from home, self-contained treatment room with outside door and toilet facilities, ventilation good, HEPA air filter, UV light, screens in place, all surfaces in plastic, cleaning protocol in place, and risk assessment consent disclaimers in place. She's an ex-risk manager. Oh, you're fantastic, great. House insurance updated to cover clients, visor for reflexology and bespoke screen, not for homeopathy, screen used, okay to proceed. I would imagine so. I think, especially as you're a professional risk assessment person, I think you've done more than your due diligence. And this is what David was saying, going above and beyond is absolutely, this is where we should be kind of getting our mind, this is what we should be getting our mindset into, I should say. So are you happy with that, David?
What can I say? Big tick, 5 stars. I mean, the only thing is, of course, the documentation. I may have missed that bit, but just make sure the audit trail's in there.
She's got all that. Yes, absolutely.
There were so many. It just was.
Yes, I'm just praising as well because we've got so much to get through. Lee says, I'm proposing doing no contact, socially distanced sound baths with only 2 people. Well, we covered this. I also sing and do voice work. I'd like to wear a mask, like to just wear a visor so I can sing more easily. Is there any risk for singing rather than just talking? Well, they do say, don't they, that there is a risk of, spraying. Because
you're projecting the sound out.
Yeah.
If you're wearing difficult, but I mean, I hate to say it, being a musician myself, but I mean, I do have a difficulty with this 1 or 2 meter social distancing stuff anyway. But let's park that. I think if you can put the mask and the visor on, I think if it's not close contact, if you can keep away minimum 2 meters, then I can't see the problem because you're obeying, the social distancing rules.
Yes.
But if there was close contact, then I think it might be a bit trickier.
Right, thank you. Julia says, if you wear full PPE, mask, visor, eye protection, gloves, and a disposable apron, does this mean you will not be asked to self-isolate in the event of coming into contact with a client? No, apparently too many chiropractors are being advised as such. That's not my understanding. My understanding is if you've been in close contact, then you have to self-isolate. I've not seen any exceptions to that rule. I don't know if you have, David.
No, and this underlines the fact that each PA or professional association will have a different take, which is industry specific to them.
Yes.
I think that the difficulty for CMA is that you have us as a broker, we have such a wide cross-section as therapists. I mean, we insure over 4,000 plus techniques and disciplines, and each one might have a slightly different slant on it. So I think at the end of the day, do the best you can is really all I can say about that one. And don't forget that chiros and osteos were put more in the category of first line medical intervention. They weren't quite so subject to all the lockdown rules in the way that everyone else was. So I think,
That's right, absolutely. Yeah, because they didn't actually have to close, did they?
But I mean, the thing is, it's like this government track and trace thing. If you are known to have been in contact with someone with it or you've got symptoms yourself, you are supposed to self-isolate, as I understand it, for a minimum of 14 days and to notify. That's the other thing. Because it's public health, you have to notify, and that's a legal requirement.
Yes, it's a notifiable disease, isn't it? So, yes. Okay, so getting almost there. Right, so Neil says, I've used a very light fabric to make my face covering. I can breathe very nicely through it, and I can also sing through it. The government advises you can make your own and does not say anything on the density of the fabric. Within reason, I would suffice to say. Yes, actually, I mean, you are right, technically, but you've got to remember that you've got to protect yourself and your client, and that, it's safety that is first and foremost. So if you are using something that you may possibly suspect might not just be doing the job, then, it's down to down to your professional expertise and judgment to really figure that out. What would you think, David? Would you agree with that?
Well, I agree with what you just said, but I do feel that if it's something like some of that lint or fabric, or, you know, it may not filter out what's coming from your mouth. That's the problem. I mean, even some of these masks aren't particularly, you know, some of them only last 2 hours. So as long as you've shown that you've done due diligence, that you've tested this out in some way. I know the government aren't saying, they're not giving any specifications, but if you know that that mask is quite possibly leaky, then that does put you in quite a compromised position. I don't know. This is difficult stuff. As an insurer, I'm not saying there's anything that would stop you doing that. As a person with various opinions and thoughts and risk management point of view, I think you could be putting yourself in a slightly vulnerable position if you knew that the mask was letting stuff through, because if it's letting it through one way, then it must be letting it through the other way.
Right.
So while I'm not trying to curb anyone or stop people doing things, so please don't take this as your insurer says you shouldn't do this. I think there are certain considerations. I'd be wary is the bottom line on that.
I would completely agree, actually, David. And Lorraine has said, beautiful, very, very, very kind offer. She's happy to depersonalize a written risk assessment and forward it to the CMA. She pulled as much guidance as she could find together, might save time for somebody. Oh, Lorraine, that is amazing. Thank you so much. Please, if you wouldn't mind sending that through, that would be absolutely fantastic. I see that Roberta's already responded to that and given you the details. Yeah, so we would love that. Thank you very, very much. It's very kind. This is what it's all about. It's all about us pulling together. You know, together we are stronger. You know, this is really what the CMA stands for, because, you know, there is massive strength in numbers. You know, as individuals we're strong, but together, you know, we really can make massive change in the world. So we've got just time for 2 more, and then that's it. I've got 2 more questions. But as I say, you know, I think what will happen is that this conversation will have probably sparked a lot of ideas. And what I think probably should do is to bring David back if he's amenable. So let me just ask these final 2 questions, and then we'll wrap up. So Suzanne says, I've made lots of masks for care homes. I've read somewhere that they can recommend 3 layers. I'll see if I can find the information and send it on. Yes, I believe they do recommend 3 layers. That's what I've seen as well. It's difficult, isn't it? Because the problem is there's so much information flying around, and sometimes, you know, it's difficult to remember when you saw something. Was it a recommendation, or was it somebody on Facebook saying, oh, I think we need 3 layers, or was it something you actually read on a government website? You know, but don't forget, we have given you all of those links, and, you know, things like the Health and Safety Executive actually talk about PPE. They talk about what you need, putting it on correctly, and then donning and doffing, to use the technical terms. So there are ways, and of course also how to dispose correctly of your PPE as well. So there are all of those things. We've given you the links for that. We're happy to give them to you again. And also, just so that you know, if anybody else needs a copy of this presentation that we're doing today, then we'll be putting it up right away, because it's such an important topic. Okay, so we won't be transcribing it and so on as we have done in the past. We just want to get this out as quickly as possible, and then we will do the transcription afterwards. Right, okay, so yes, Roberta very kindly said, please contact us at roberta@the-cma.org.uk with any links, any follow-ups, anything else that you would like to ask or suggest. Right, okay, so Gail says, I understood that for practitioners, track and trace could not close you down for the 2 weeks if the mask was IRR rated and the gloves and apron, even if you were in contact with a person who became a confirmed case. She'll find the info and send later. This is from Public Health England. Interesting, because Health and Safety Executive and Public Health England confusingly are slightly at loggerheads. So that would be really helpful, and we can look at that. We can then get that out to you as well. So thank you, Gail. Yes, we would really love that. Thank you. And yes, Helen, it is, as I just said, you preempted me there. Yes, it is entirely possible to watch this again, and we appreciate we've put so much information into this one swift hour. So I just want to say to David, or ask David whether he has anything that he would like to finish with, just to wrap us up, because we're nearly at the top of the hour.
Well, just to say this, that always remember that we're part of a very good professional association that looks after you, cares about the sector, but also that is part of a much bigger worldwide community. Most of them don't talk to each other or know about each other, but I assure you that the natural health and well-being movement is alive and well, and that your participation in it, from my point of view as a long-time user since the 1960s, you know, is vital and very much valued. And you know, I'm really hoping that you stay with your dream, you stay with your enthusiasm, despite all the, you know, the stuff that's thrown up, and the you know, the confusion and the conflicting advice and all the rest of it, that you stay with your vision of supporting and looking after your clients and building your businesses. So, you know, there's a lot of negativity out there. There's even a lot of paranoia. Just, I'm sure you've heard this before, just don't buy into it and keep walking one step at a time. And good luck and peace to all of you.
Oh, David, thank you so, so much. It's such a wonderful thing, I think, for the industry that, you know, that our biggest insurer, and certainly our most popular insurer, is himself, you know, is so passionate about complementary medicine. And you know, you do practice, you are a healer, aren't you, David? And you know, a lot of people don't realize that about you. And you know, apart from being a brilliant musician and so on, you're a man of many, many talents. But yeah, I think it's wonderful to know that we've got somebody who's one of us, who speaks the same language as us, and isn't just this kind of coming from this corporate background that spotted an opportunity to sell insurance to practitioners, you know. So this is one of the reasons we absolutely love Balen's, and we never hesitate to recommend you guys. You're brilliant. So thank you so much, and we shall love you and leave you, and just please stay well, stay safe. We absolutely love doing these for you because we know that they do actually really, really help. And Roberta, as always, I want to thank you for being so absolutely amazing. You know, you are just, well, an absolute godsend to the CMA and everybody that you look after so, so very well. So thank you so much. Okay,
thanks everyone.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.